Our sacred readings. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, "I must turn aside and look at this great sight and see why the bush is not burned up." When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, "Moses, Moses." And he said, "Here I am." Then he said, "Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground." He said further, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, "I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey. The cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppress them. So come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" God said, "I will be with you." The perfection of work. They all attain perfection when they find joy in their work. Hear how a person attains perfection and attains joy in their work. A person attains perfection when their work is worship of God, from whom all things come and who is in all.
What's the craziest job you ever had?
Always a motel maid.
Motel maid. Mucking stalls. Singing telegrams. Say again? Running a nonprofit. I feel you, brother. Is that removing staples from boarding passes. Exciting. What? Census taker. Somebody's got to do that. Every 10 years. Any others?
Cleaning my father's mechanic shop.
Door-to-door encyclopedia salesman. There's a 20th century job.
Cleaning my father's mechanic shop.
Cleaning your father's mechanic shop. That's right. 30 guys using that shop. Here, son, clean that up. I think mine at the top of the list might be selling Christmas trees. I've learned the difference between Scotch pine and noble fir. Scotch pine is cheap. It's the Charlie Brown of Christmas trees. Noble fur is for the folks up on the hill who can afford such things. Well, it's Labor Sunday because tomorrow is Labor Day Monday. Labor Sunday is a chance for us to reflect on work. What is work? The status of our work. The meaning, even, of our work. And we could go lots of directions with that as a community of faith. We could talk about right livelihood. Right livelihood would be that place where your particular gifts and skills are matched up to the right job. And where that job itself is right for the earth and for the people. That your job is not a job causing harm, but a job producing good, or potentially could do so. We could talk about right livelihood. And we could talk about vocation. Vocation is that next deeper step, where we, perhaps in the words of the Bhagavad Gita this morning, the Hindu sacred scriptures, find that place where there's something that we recognize in what we're doing that is a call of God. It is a vocation. It is more than a job. It might be a job, but it could be for us a vocation. I think my parents had a vocation that had nothing to do with earning a paycheck. It was all about spending their paycheck on us. They had jobs, not careers. But I think their calling, their sense of their calling from God was family. Raising these 3 sons, raising this family together. This is our vocation. This is what we're truly working at in the world. So we could talk about right livelihood, we could talk about vocation. And we could talk about labor. And that's where I'm headed this morning. Could be lots of different kinds of labor, so there is that part, the part that the Bhagavad Gita shared. We can do it as worship of God. Dr. King said a street sweeper could sweep streets like Michelangelo painted. Anyone can do excellent service. We could even talk about the inner work, the inner labor that's necessary to know our right livelihood, to do something beautifully like Michelangelo. But today I invite us to reflect on labor, our labor, God's labor. The kind of working and labor that's out there and how that is. I want to frame that in terms of one of the stances that this church has taken. It was some years ago, somebody might know the exact years, doing the math from 2014, that this church, this congregation decided to become a just peace church. That doesn't mean we're just going to work on peace. It means there's something about justice and peace that's important. In 1985, our national gathering of churches decided to become a just peace denomination and to invite all the UCC bodies to follow. And what does that mean? Well, back then it meant an interrelation of friendship, justice, and common security from violence. And you can certainly imagine in the 1980s. In the 1980s, there was a concern in those Reagan-era years of violence, of great violence, nuclear violence even. There was a desire to question the very institution of war itself. That perhaps this was not the business that any of us should be involved in, and we should be resisting it. Just peace can still be understood in an anti-war way. But I'd like us to think of that beautiful description of the interrelationship of friendship, justice, and common security from violence. Think of that and have that lead us to a broader, deeper base of understanding. I think it leads us to a quality of relationship. It leads us to a value of shared power in relationships, power with others, and a shared concern for neighbor and self. Violence is an outright expression of power over another. It's coercion, it's domination. Injustice is also a way to say that there is a relationship that is not well, is not in service of life, is an oppression of one over the other, or at least a neglect at the minimum. Contrast that with a just peace. A just peace way of relating is where both parties are subject and one is not an object. The justice of relations in this way of being leads to the peace that is present. It is the nature of the relationship that is just that leads to the reality and the feeling of peace. No justice, no peace, as the bumper stickers say. The one leads to the other. Peace is a positive state of blessing and generativity, of mutual benefit and respect, of reciprocity and shared power. So, if we are a just peace congregation, we will be paying attention to relationships. Relationships within us. Sometimes we have parts of us beating up on other parts, right inside here. That's injustice. Does not lead to peace. The relationships between us in this community, we are tending to those, learning about them. The relationships out there in the world, in society, we are looking for justice. We are looking for a way in which there is reciprocity and balance and mutual benefit, a care for the whole. Well, if that's the case, and this is Labor Sunday, it seems like a good Sunday to check in on the relationships in work. Is there shared concern and shared power in our situations of labor? How is it with workers and their jobs? That's another way to say it. Well, thanks to the labor movements in this country, this is a great time to remember all that has been given. We enjoy lots of privileges. Working is safer than it used to be, generally. Workers' compensation, 5-day work week, 40-hour work week, the right to organize and bargain collectively, and many more. This is from labor movements. This is from people like Cesar Chavez, who were out there day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, wanting good relationships with the people, that the labor had some shared power, some dignity even. Thank you to Cesar. Thank you to all those who have labored. And there is more to be done. There is more that is not just. There is more that is not making for peace. And I won't go through all the statistics. They're rather onerous. They are legion. But the trend is for the disappearance of stable, well-paying jobs and the appearance of more low-wage work with fewer benefits and less stability. You've probably heard this. Wages and purchasing power for working people have not kept up with economic growth for some decades now. Economic inequality grows, and in significant part due to wage stagnation. What you get paid just doesn't buy what it used to. In addition, there are sectors of the economy often filled with people of color where there is less safety, more wage theft, less legal protection, fewer connections to the benefits that accrue to the relationship of government and work. In the current state of our economy, since the recovery from 2008 began, 95% of what has been gained has gone to the top 1%. So while many company profits have recovered and even set records, wages for many remain stagnant. Government programs to help the working poor and those in the place of food insecurity have been curtailed in recent years and are still under threat. Funding to expand these programs could be gotten simply by limiting and revoking tax benefits and deductions that people and industries of significant means enjoy. This may not be news for many of you. You read this, you care about this. but it's worthy of mentioning in our community, in this place of worship on this Labor Sunday. So today, we read a story from the book of Exodus, the book of, interestingly enough, coming out. It's a coming out, an exodus, an exit. And a big part of that saga is this story. Some of you even see it every year if you watch network television. Who would have known it was Charlton Heston up on that mountain? Who would have thought? That story of the burning bush that is not consumed. This is one of those great images from Scripture that gives us a clue that, entered into different consciousness, different space. This is not ordinary senses. This is a different, sacred, mystical space that Moses has entered into. It's an important part of this saga of Exodus. And those beautiful words come through. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them. The story says God will bring them up into a land of milk and honey. This is the first appearance of that phrase. So this is the promise in another form through Moses to this people. So we have a story of a tribe, but we also have a story about God. About God's work. What does God do all day? You could watch the movie Bruce Almighty and have some fun with what it would be like to be in such a place if we anthropomorphize it and think of it as a person kind of mystery. But in this story, we have one of the core stories of our tradition. God's business, God's work, God's labor is liberation. What does God care about? What is God working at? And how does that work? Well, in this story, God is listening, hearing, and then acting. Albeit slowly. We often wonder if God has checked the plans we have made for God today. A little late on that. Could have used that a month ago. Let's hurry up with cleaning this thing up. That's a common thing from people of faith, wondering where God is and why God isn't operating on our plans. Why life seems so messed up. Why it doesn't get all straightened out. There's another important part of this story. God is not only laboring, God's labor of liberation, but God is inviting, calling, challenging even. God just doesn't go on and done, there you go. Thanks for calling. God invites Moses. You do it. I'll help you. And like many of us, when we come to those moments of challenge, of call, we say, can we possibly do this? How can we do this? How can I do this? I don't speak very well, Moses said. God's answer? I will be with you. I will be with you. If we are to be a just peace community, we will have to go through those moments where we say, I don't know. It's pretty messed up out there. What can we do? But God will still keep calling. And God will say to us, I will be with you. I will be with you. I don't know, Lord. It seems like a big mountain. Pharaoh is a big, scary dude. They have the power. We don't. God's answer? I will be with you. And if you read the saga, and I actually encourage you to do this, go ahead, read a Bible, try. It doesn't happen all in one day. Lots of setbacks. Moses even gets out there. Now this I can't imagine. So I want to talk to Moses and say, let me get this straight. You're up on a mountain, you have this mystical experience, you hear the voice of God. And like 3 days later, you say, I don't think this is really happening. That's exactly what happens. And it happens to the people over and over. It's not always a mountaintop. It's not always we're sure and we're certain and we got it and we feel it and it's happening for us. But over time, the Exodus happens, the liberation happens. Moses and Aaron, and with lots of help, it happens. And God's work in this story is accomplished. Even with Moses questioning all along the way. God, why have you done this? Why you're not helping? We just made it worse. They just got mad and took away our straw. God still just says, no, I will be with you. Not done yet. Keep going. So I'd like to finish with a story of labor. I'm sure by our standards today, it seemed like a simple request or list of requests. All they wanted was recognition of the union, a minimum daily wage for each type of job at this work site, an 8-hour workday, fair measurement of work produced and pay for all work performed, and the right of working families to live and conduct their business where they pleased. Might not seem like much to us, but the coal companies refused every one of these demands. A strike ensued, and 100 years ago, actually from this last Easter, 19 were left dead as militia troops of the state of Colorado opened fire on a camp of strikers and their families in Ludlow. The dead included women and numerous children, and more violence and death would follow as retaliation happened in the weeks that passed. And that just didn't fix it. Things didn't get better the next month. Many officials blamed the violence on new immigrants who weren't even Americans. Sound familiar? It took years of reform to really take shape, as after that the KKK had a revival of power in the state of Colorado in the 1920s. But over time, the labor movement gained its demands, gained more of its dignity. So like the story of Moses and the Hebrews, liberation for those mine workers did not just happen overnight. I mention that story so we remember on this Labor Sunday and on tomorrow, Labor Monday, all the sacrifices that have been made. The people who put their lives on the line so that there might be more dignity and more power for workers. That relationships between workers and employers might be more just. So that we remember and thank them. So that we know there's a way it's working itself out right here too. That's a Colorado story for us to remember 100 years ago. So on this Labor Sunday, consider work. What work are you about in the world? What work is God about in your heart? What is your call from God that might go beyond your paycheck? Are you in right livelihood? Are you in the right place where God has called you and working? Or like my parents, as you just get that paycheck that's good, are you using that paycheck to serve the call that God has called you to? Your vocation maybe lies outside of employment. So many beautiful vocations have nothing to do with that kind of structured workplace. And we, as the Washington Park United Church of Christ, are we about the labor of God, the labor of liberation? With these questions, let us be in prayer and reflection, and let us know that God will be with us on this journey. Amen.